Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. You've seen the corsets. You've heard the word Victorian tossed around in costume dramas, candlelit mystery shows, and rainy BBC miniseries. Maybe you imagine lace gloves, buttoned boots, or fog-draped London streets echoing with the clack of horse hooves. But the reality? Oh, it's grimier. It's colder. It smells worse. And it's a whole lot louder than any quiet drawing room scene might have you believe. Tonight, we're not walking alongside a top-hatted detective or sipping tea with the Queen. No. Tonight, you are the newest, least prepared member of a typical Victorian household. A normal family, middle or lower class. The kind where you don't take supper at 8. You survive until it. Before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know, what time is it where you're watching from? Always fascinating to see who's nodding off in Melbourne and who's wide awake in Minnesota. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. Let the day melt away. And let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey. What it was like to live with a Victorian family. Forget the romance of top hats and horse-drawn carriages. Tonight is about the dirt under the fingernails, the clanging of coal scuttles, the thud of wooden clogs on cold stone floors. You're not visiting the past. You're waking up in it. You'll be living in a house with too many people, not enough food, and air that smells like coal smoke, boiled cabbage, and something far more concerning under the stairs. You'll feel the chill of an unheated room in winter. You'll squint at your dinner by candlelight, not for the mood, but because gaslight costs money and the candle's already burned halfway through. You'll listen through paper-thin walls as a baby cries, a father coughs, and a neighbor's shouting matches bleed into your dreams. You'll learn what it means to work from dawn until exhaustion, to eat because you must, not because it tastes good, and to wear clothes so stiff and itchy you'd swear they were made from old curtains and pennants. This isn't high society. This is the backbone of Victorian England. This is the family who never shows up in the history books. The coal-dusted, underpaid, overworked masses who lived and died in cramped homes with drafty windows, uneven floors, and rules that never quite made sense. Tonight's journey is not comfortable. It's not polite. And it's not clean. But if you hang on, if you let yourself fall into it, it might just make you feel very, very grateful for your mattress, your heating system, and the gentle hum of modern plumbing. So tuck in. You're about to step into a world where everything you take for granted, privacy, comfort, hygiene, even silence, is suddenly a luxury, a dream. And speaking of dreams, let's begin. You open your eyes. At first, it's hard to tell whether you're awake or still stuck in a strange, soot-colored dream. The air is heavy, almost wet, not with moisture, but with the scent of coal dust, boiled potatoes, and the sour tang of something old. Something sour, something very alive. You blink slowly, vision adjusting to the low, gray light pressing in through a streaked window pane the size of a dinner plate. It's morning. Though if you're expecting a sunbeam or birdsong, you've come to the wrong century. Your bed is not a bed. It's more of a wooden frame with a sagging sack of straw pretending to be a mattress. It groans under your weight and offers no comfort. Just pokes and lumps and the whispery rustle of something skittering beneath the floorboards. You're lying under a single woolen blanket, heavy with damp and age. It smells like an attic that caught a cough. There's no duvet, no sheets, and definitely no memory foam. Your pillow, if it can be called that, is a lumpy sack filled with leftover fabric scraps, flattened almost entirely by years of heads like yours trying and failing to rest. And you are not alone. You share the room, not with a spouse, not with a roommate, but with at least 2 siblings, maybe 3, and one grandparent who wheezes in their sleep like a teapot that never quite whistles. In fact, you're not even in your own room. You're in the room, because there's only one. This is the back bedroom, barely wide enough to stretch your arms in. The wallpaper is peeling in slow motion. The window glass is fogged with condensation, your breath clouding it further. Outside, the street is just starting to come alive with the clatter of iron wheels and the clip-clop of hooves on cobblestone. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings. 6 a.m., time to get up. You try to sit, but your neck protests. Your back groans. Your joints are cold. The air in the room is the same temperature as the bricks in the wall. A chill that sinks through your nightclothes and settles somewhere deep in your bones. There is no central heating, no radiator, and certainly no thermostat. The fire in the grate below went out hours ago, and with it, the last bit of warmth. If you're lucky, someone in the family got up early to poke at the ashes, coax a new flame from yesterday's coal. If you're unlucky, you'll have to do it yourself. You pull the blanket aside and swing your legs over the edge of the bed. The floorboards are cold, splintered, and slightly damp beneath your bare feet. No slippers, no carpet. Just a thin scattering of sawdust meant to soak up spills, and sometimes worse. You step carefully, avoiding the creaky plank near the door. Not because it's noisy, but because it dips ominously in the middle. It's been threatening to give way for years. The kind of thing people talk about fixing, but never do. Just another patch of home you learn to live with. You reach the washstand, a simple wooden table topped with a cracked porcelain basin and a pitcher of water that's as cold as the morning air. There is no tap, no sink, and certainly no hot water unless someone heated it over the fire, which they haven't. You cup your hands, splash your face, and gasp. It's a slap. Ice water on sleep-numbed skin. Your fingers are raw already. You wipe them on a stiff linen cloth that doubles as a towel, curtain, and occasionally bandage. It smells like yesterday's hands. The washstand drawer doesn't close all the way. Inside it, there's a worn comb with missing teeth and a small scuffed mirror. You catch your reflection, pale, tired, and already slightly sooty. You haven't even stepped outside, and somehow, the grime of Victorian England is already finding its way under your fingernails. Now comes the daily shuffle, the awkward dance of dressing in a room full of half-asleep family members. There is no privacy, just corners and modesty turned into performance art. If you're lucky, your clothes aren't still damp from yesterday. If you're very lucky, the neighbor's laundry didn't leak through the wall again. Your morning outfit is already laid out, not because you planned it, but because it's your only one. You pull on your underclothes first, rough and itchy, then your trousers or skirt, your blouse or shirt, your socks that don't quite match. You button yourself up, layer by layer, until you resemble a person shaped more by necessity than style. In the corner, a chamber pot sits half full. You try not to look at it. You try even harder not to think about the next step. Emptying it. No one wants that job, but someone has to take the heavy ceramic bowl down the narrow, creaking stairs, through the main room, and into the small brick yard out back, to pour it into the shared waste pit. Hopefully before anyone sees, or smells, or judges. Some families have an outhouse. Yours does not. The house creaks as it wakes. Feet thump on the stairs. A kettle begins to whistle in the room below. You hear coughing, lots of it. The persistent, hacking cough that defines Victorian mornings. Smog and soot, and decades of second-hand chimney smoke clinging to everyone's lungs. It's not tuberculosis yet, but give it time. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else a pot lid clatters to the floor. Your mother is already shouting for help. Your father is already gone, off to work before dawn. And you're just trying to find your second sock. By now the smell of breakfast, if you can call it that, begins to waft up through the floorboards. It's not bacon or eggs. It's not toast or coffee. It's something more modest, more watery. And we'll get to that. But for now, you stretch once more, neck aching, back sore, the chill never quite leaving your toes. This is your home. Cold, cramped, crowded, shared with people who love you and yell at you in equal measure. It's loud. It's small. It smells like coal dust and life. And it's just the beginning. Welcome to another day in a Victorian household. You've got a long way to go. You make your way down the narrow staircase, ducking instinctively at the low beam halfway down, because even after all this time, you've hit your head on it enough to remember. The steps creak, not politely, but like they're protesting your very existence. One groans so loudly that someone from the kitchen mutters, "Finally." The lower floor isn't much warmer than the bedroom, but there's the faint glow of a fire in the hearth now, coaxed back to life with a bit of coal and sheer willpower. The smoke hasn't quite found its way up the chimney yet, so it curls along the ceiling like a lazy cat, lingering in your hair and eyes. You cough. Everyone coughs. The house is always slightly smoky. It's just a matter of how much. The kitchen is the largest room in the house, but still too small for how many bodies need to move through it every morning. The table takes up most of the space. It's scarred with years of knife marks and scorched spots from too hot pots. A wooden bench lines one side, worn smooth by generations of backsides. There are no matching chairs, just a mix of stools and borrowed things that might once have been furniture. On the stove, a kettle bubbles over with something that can only be described as beige. Breakfast. If you're imagining eggs, bacon, toast, or even tea with milk and sugar, reset your expectations. You're poor, or at best, nearly poor. And that means breakfast is not designed for joy. It is designed for calories, for survival, and for not passing out before noon. This morning you get gruel, a thin porridge of oats or barley, stretched with water and maybe a splash of yesterday's milk if it hasn't turned. It's warm, which is its only redeeming quality. It smells faintly of wood smoke and slightly more strongly of defeat. You spoon it from a chipped bowl, careful not to scrape the bottom, where it's scorched. There's no sugar, too expensive, no fruit, out of season, no cinnamon, butter, or jam. Just soft, hot, bland mush. It slides down your throat like apology in edible form. If you're lucky, there's bread. Not fresh, certainly. A few stale slices hacked off a dense loaf made from rye and mystery grain. You dunk it in your gruel to soften it. Otherwise, it might crack a tooth. The crust is tougher than boot leather and nearly as flavorful. To drink, you have water, boiled, hopefully, or weak tea, reused from yesterday's leaves. Actual tea is a luxury, and the second, even third, brewing is more common than you'd like. If you're especially lucky, there's milk, but it's thin, blue-tinged, and has an expiration date measured in hours. It's not refrigerated. There is no refrigeration, and if there's coffee, then someone has been promoted or is hiding something. You eat quickly. Meals are not social events. They're moments of necessity. The fire is being used to cook, to boil, to warm, not to linger beside. Your feet stay cold on the stone floor. You hunch your shoulders. You sip from a tin mug that burns your fingers but doesn't warm your hands. Around you, the rest of the family moves in patterns honed by years of repetition. No one speaks unless they have to. Your older brother is already pulling on his boots, thick, cracked leather, wrapped in string to keep them from falling apart. Your sister is brushing her hair with a comb that's missing most of its teeth. Your mother wipes the baby's face with the same cloth she just dried the dishes with. Hygiene is a suggestion. Efficiency is survival. Speaking of hygiene, it's time to clean yourself, or try to. There is no bathroom, not in the house, not even outside. There is a tin basin, a jug of water, and a bar of soap so old and worn it could be mistaken for a smooth stone. You wet a cloth, rub the soap into it, and wipe down the essentials: face, armpits, hands. You skip the rest. There's no time. And honestly, there's no point. If you're lucky, and it's Saturday, you might be allowed a full bath later. But don't get excited. Bath means a large galvanized metal tub dragged out and filled with buckets of hot water from the fire. You go in last, or near last, because you're the youngest or the least important. The water is already gray and soapy and questionable. You sit in it anyway, knees to your chest, trying not to make waves. Today, though, no bath. Just a wipe down, a splash of cold water, and the strong hope you don't sweat too much before noon. Your toothbrush doesn't exist. At best, there's a cloth and a pinch of salt, maybe a twig chewed to fray the end. You rub it along your teeth, spit in the basin, and try not to gag. Your gums bleed sometimes. Everyone's do. But your teeth are still mostly in your head, and that's something to be thankful for. There's no deodorant, just powder, if you're rich. For you, it's a dab of vinegar under the arms or nothing at all. You try to smell less like a person and more like furniture. You will fail. Hair is brushed once, braided or tied back. You might not wash it for another week, maybe 2. Soap is expensive. Water is heavy. And lice? Well, they're just part of the package. There's a comb for that too. Metal, with teeth so close together it takes hair and scalp. If your head itches, you ignore it. If it gets worse, you blame the neighbor's kids. Clothes are changed when they're dirty. Not one speck of dirt dirty. We're talking stand up on their own dirty. You wear the same trousers, skirt, blouse, or shirt all week, sometimes longer. Underthings, if you have them, are rinsed in cold water and dried near the fire. You pray they're dry by morning. If not, you wear them damp. You lace your boots tightly so they don't fall apart. You fasten buttons. You pin your collar. You smooth your apron. The mirror by the door is cracked, so you use the sliver near the bottom that still shows your chin. It's enough. You look fine. Or fine enough. Clean in a Victorian household does not mean fresh. It means not visibly filthy. It means you've washed your hands. It means your hair is combed. It means your socks don't crunch when you walk. And that's enough. You grab your coat, heavy wool, slightly moth-eaten, but warm. Your cap or bonnet goes on your head. You step toward the door, pausing only to grab your lunch, wrapped in cloth and tied with string. Bread, maybe a piece of cheese, no sweets, no fruit, and definitely no napkin. Outside, the street is already filling with smoke and sound. The city is waking up. And you've survived another Victorian morning. Gruel, smoke, and all. But now comes the hard part. It's time to go to work. You step outside. The door closes behind you with a stubborn groan, and for a brief second, the scent of inside, coal smoke, boiled linen, wet wool, is replaced by the scent of outside. Coal smoke, horse manure, wet wool, and something else. Something sour. Something industrial. You are now fully dressed for the day. But dressed is a loose term. What you're wearing isn't a fashion statement. It's survival. Let's start with the base layer. You've got a chemise or undershirt made from rough, scratchy cotton, or linen, if you're one of the lucky ones. It's not soft. It's not breathable. It's not new. It's been patched at least twice, and the seams rub the skin under your arms until you've developed a tolerance that doctors would call impressive and children would call ow. Over that goes your main outfit, which, let's be honest, is probably the only outfit you own. Maybe you have a second set for Sundays or funerals, but this one is your workhorse, your uniform for survival. It might be a dress, a pinafore, a pair of worn trousers, and a collarless shirt. There is no elastic. There are no zippers. Everything is fastened with buttons, pins, and sheer will. Your coat, if you have one, is made of wool, and not the soft kind. It's the sort of wool that could exfoliate barnacles off a ship. It's heavy, always a little damp, and smells faintly of mildew and something that might once have been soup. But it's warm, or at least warmer than nothing. Shoes. Let's talk about shoes. You might have boots, big cracked leather things with mismatched laces and soles so worn they've practically become socks. Or maybe you have clogs, wooden-bottomed, iron-shod, that make every step sound like a carpenter fell down the stairs. They're not designed for comfort. They're designed to last longer than your arches. Your socks have holes. Everyone's socks have holes. You patch them until the patches wear out, and then you patch the patches. On cold mornings, you might wrap newspaper around your feet inside your boots. And yes, your feet are always slightly damp, even when it hasn't rained in days. If you're a child, your clothes are hand-me-downs from someone who wasn't that much bigger than you, but had the decency to outgrow them before they fell apart. If you're a girl, Your dress has a hem that's been let down, then let down again. If you're a boy, your trousers are patched so much you can't tell which part was original. Either way, your sleeves are probably too short. Your knees are permanently exposed to the elements. You don't get to choose your clothes. The clothes choose you, based on what hasn't been pawned, based on what fits enough, based on what still exists in your home after a bad week. Speaking of home, let's go back to where you sleep, eat, work, and freeze. Your shelter, your Victorian house, is not a charming little brick cottage with ivy on the walls. It's not one of those Instagram-worthy restorations with a copper kettle and a cat on the hearth. No, this is a working-class home, built quickly, cheaply, and without an ounce of pity. If you're in the city, you're in a terraced house. Row after row of nearly identical dwellings, packed so tightly you can hear your neighbor's indigestion through the wall. The bricks are dark from decades of smoke. The gutters leak. The doors stick in the rain. The street is narrow, muddy, and slopes just enough to carry the wastewater in a cheerful little stream right past your front stoop. The house is small. 2 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs, if you're lucky. Families of 6, 8, even 10 people live in these places. Privacy is theoretical. Doors don't close all the way. Curtains are made of rags or newspaper, sometimes both. The walls inside are covered in cheap plaster that flakes when you touch it. In winter, frost blooms on them like tiny glass flowers. In summer, damp rises from the ground and makes the wallpaper curl at the corners. The wallpaper itself is a relic, a pattern that might once have been flowers, now mostly faded into brown smudges. It peels and crumbles. No one remembers what color it used to be. The floor is stone or bare wood. If you're rural, it might just be packed earth. Cold rises through it like a ghost. Rugs are rare, and when they exist, they are threadbare, woven from scraps, and always slightly wet. Your feet are never warm. Never. You learn to live with it. The kitchen isn't really a kitchen. It's just the back of the main room, where the hearth is. That hearth, the single open fireplace, is the heart of the house. It's where you cook, where you boil water, where you dry your socks, warm your hands, and sometimes sleep when the bedrooms get too cold. It's also where the air is thickest with soot and smoke. Chimneys don't work well when they're choked with a decade of ash. And if the wind turns wrong, the smoke simply doesn't leave. It lingers, curling into your lungs, settling into your clothes, clinging to your hair. Everyone in the house smells faintly of fire and onions. Upstairs, the bedrooms are barely large enough to lie down in. Ceilings slope, windows rattle. There's no insulation, just thin walls and faith. You sleep 3 to a bed or more. Some children sleep in drawers. Some sleep curled up on the floor in coats. The lucky ones get the corner nearest the fire downstairs. The unlucky ones get the attic or the coal shed. The house is not quiet. It breathes, it groans, it drips. You can hear the neighbors arguing. You can hear your mother crying in the pantry. You can hear the mice scratching in the walls. They're always there. You get used to them. You learn to stop flinching when they scurry across your foot in the dark. And yet, somehow, this is home. It's cramped. It's worn. It smells like cabbage and laundry and coal. but it's familiar. And when it rains, which it does often, the drip of water into the bucket in the corner is almost comforting. Almost. You know which windows stick. You know which floorboards creak. You know the rhythm of the stairs when your father comes home and whether he's in a good mood by how fast he climbs them. And outside, the city looms, or the fields stretch, depending on where you are. But always, you return here, to this drafty, patched, overcrowded shelter with too few blankets and too many feet. You call it your own, and you pray it survives another winter. You step out the door, and the day doesn't wait for you. There's no grace period, no gentle transition from home to the world. The moment your boots hit the stone or dirt, you're on the clock, even if no one's paying you yet. Victorian life is work. Constant, grinding, breath-stealing, back-breaking work. Unless you're rich, and you're not, you don't have a job. You are a job. If you're a child, that job likely started when you were 5 or 6. Too small to reach the table. Doesn't matter. You can pick threads from the loom. You can crawl into machinery. You can sit for 12 hours beside your mother and sort coal, tie labels, roll matches, pluck feathers, dip candles. Anything small hands can do before they're too blistered to keep moving. Your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the shift bell, the factory horn, the coal barge schedule, or the man with the ledger and the watch who deducts your wages if you're even a minute late. And that minute will cost you a lot. Maybe your dinner. If you're older, you're earning a wage, a few shillings a week, maybe less. For labor that would horrify any modern safety inspector. Maybe you're in a mill. It's loud, hotter than a fever, full of lint and moving belts and deafening grinding clatter. You work 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. You breathe cotton dust that turns your lungs into soft gray bags. You keep your fingers close to the spinning frames, and if you slip, you don't stop the machine. You pull your hand back, wrap it, and keep going. There are plenty of people waiting for your job. Maybe you work at a brickworks or in a foundry, hauling hot molds, shoveling slag, or pouring molten iron into forms with no gloves, no mask, and no mercy. No. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and burning metal. You come home each night covered in dust and burns, and when the burns turn into infections, you rub them with lard and keep going. If you're a chimney sweep, you climb. You're a child, sent up narrow flues with a brush in one hand and fear in the other. The soot cakes your skin, turns your lungs black, and fills your eyes with grit. You cough it up in your sleep, but you're small and you fit, and your boss pays your parents a few pennies to keep sending you back. Maybe you're a domestic servant, living in someone else's house, waking before them and sleeping long after they do. You clean their coal grates, scrub their floors, empty their chamber pots. You don't speak unless spoken to. You're invisible unless you drop something. Then you're useless. Maybe you're a miner, which means your day starts in the dark and ends in the dark. And the part in between is spent crawling through tunnels narrower than your shoulders. A candle on your cap, praying the ceiling doesn't collapse. You don't own your tools. You pay to use them. You pay for your own lamp oil. You pay for the cart to carry your coal. And when you die, they'll deduct your last week's wages from your coffin. Maybe you're self-employed, a street vendor, a mudlark, a flower seller, or a rat catcher. You walk the streets shouting wares, digging through muck, or carrying trays of trinkets hoping someone, anyone, wants to buy what you've got. There's no salary, just hope. And if you're a woman, you do all of the above, plus the unpaid job of keeping everyone else alive. You wake early, you work all day, you cook, clean, mind children, mend clothes, manage pennies, and try not to collapse. You might take in sewing, laundry, or extra borders. You might walk miles to sell buttons or clean someone else's chamber pots. You don't rest unless you're ill. And if you're ill, you work anyway, just slower. If you're unmarried and need income, your options shrink even more. You might become a governess, isolated, overworked, and underpaid. You might work in a shop, standing for 12 hours in tight boots. Or you might work in a factory and keep your head down. And if none of those work out, well, there's always the other option. The one society pretends not to notice but will judge you harshly for if you choose it. And many women did. Because survival is louder than shame. Even when you're not at work, you're still working. There's washing, not just clothes, but scrubbing floors, walls, dishes, anything that gets coated in soot and grease and coal dust, which is to say everything. You heat water over a fire. You carry it in buckets. You scrub with harsh soap, your knuckles raw and nails split, while a toddler cries at your ankles. There's cooking, done over an open flame or a coal stove that never heats evenly. Bread must be made, vegetables boiled, porridge stirred, tea stretched, leftovers repurposed until they stop resembling food and start resembling punishment. There's mending, socks with holes, trousers with knees worn through, aprons with frayed straps. You sew by candlelight, the needle wobbling in your hand after a long day, eyes watering from fatigue and coal smoke. And when the day is finally done, you're not done. Because someone needs to prepare for tomorrow. Lay out the clothes, bank the fire, sweep the hearth, lock the door, and maybe, just maybe, sit for 5 minutes with your aching feet before collapsing into a bed that's already occupied by someone snoring and sweating through a shared blanket. There is no weekend. Sunday is for church, for polishing your boots, for keeping still and pretending you're not angry that the man next to you in the pew has clean fingernails and never lifted a shovel in his life. There is no vacation. If you don't work, you don't eat. If you get sick, you fall behind. If you fall behind, you starve. If you starve, no one notices until the rent collector realizes you're late. And even if you're skilled, a carpenter, a cobbler, a tailor, a printer, your work is never guaranteed. A bad winter, a strike, a dock closure, or a sick child can bring ruin faster than the bailiff can knock on your door. So you keep going. Not because you're strong, though you are. Not because you love it, though you pretend to. But because there is no other option. Work isn't what you do, it's what you are. A tool, a moving part, a pair of hands that can lift, stir, sweep, stitch, mine, carry, sell, clean, or climb. And when those hands finally stop working, Victorian society stops seeing you altogether, even when you're working, scrubbing floors, stitching seams, hauling buckets, praying the coal doesn't run out. There's something else that never leaves the room. Belief. It's in the walls, in the stories, in the pauses between conversations. In a Victorian family, religion isn't a weekend hobby. It's the scaffolding of daily life and the shadow that falls across it. You wake up with it. You go to sleep under it. And whether it comforts or frightens you depends entirely on the day. In the morning, the house begins with prayer. Not long, there's no time for that, but just enough to mumble thanks, to ask forgiveness, to beg for strength, usually led by the eldest, if there's time. If not, a quiet whisper will do. Some cross themselves, some don't. Some just glance upward and hope that's enough. Because in this world, God is always watching, always judging, and probably not pleased. Sunday morning is not a rest day. It's a performance. Clothes are cleaned, boots are blacked, hair is slicked or pinned. You walk to church, all of you, even if the wind is howling, even if someone has a fever, even if your shoes are made of more patch than leather. You go. Because everyone else is going. Because to miss church is to be noticed. And to be noticed is dangerous. Inside the church, it's cold. Always. The windows are stained glass, but they don't keep out the wind. You sit stiff-backed on wooden pews, trying not to fidget, trying not to cough. You listen to a sermon that feels more like a warning than inspiration. Hell is very real here. So is judgment. So is eternal punishment for sins you might not have realized you committed. For coveting, for pride, for missing morning prayers, for thinking inappropriate thoughts about the widow next door who's always drying her laundry with the windows open. Even small children are taught that their souls are in danger. You lie? That's a black mark. You steal a sweet? Black mark. You imagine slapping the coal man who shouted at your mother? Double black mark. But faith isn't just about hellfire. It's also about survival. Because life in the Victorian era is hard. It's short. It's painful. And belief gives it structure. It offers a reason for the suffering. A promise that the reward comes after. That the meek truly will inherit the earth. Just not this one. And so you follow the rules. Most of them. You confess your sins, even if the priest is a tired man who smells like pipe smoke and disappointment. You kneel. You murmur. You try to be good. Because if you're not, you risk more than damnation. You risk gossip. You risk shame. And in a tightly packed neighborhood, shame spreads faster than the flu. But religion isn't the only belief system in the house. There are other things you believe in. Older things. Things that don't sit in pews or wear vestments. Your grandmother talks of omens. A crow on the roof. A broken mirror. A clock that stops ticking. She warns against cutting your nails on a Sunday. Against turning a loaf upside down. Against whistling after dark. Your mother tells you not to speak ill of the dead, not just out of respect, but because they might hear you. She crosses herself if someone mentions childbirth. She throws salt over her shoulder if it spills. She keeps an onion on the windowsill just in case. You've heard of fairy rings, of witches who steal the breath of babies, of black dogs that follow the dying, of ghosts that walk if the body isn't buried with coins on the eyes. You don't say these things in church, but you still believe them. And in a world where science hasn't arrived yet, not for families like yours, it all blends together. Bible verses and herbal charms, prayers and whispered folk remedies, crucifixes and horseshoes, psalms and pins through the windowsill to keep evil away. You wear a button stitched with red thread for protection. You hang a sprig of rosemary over the door when someone is ill. And if a child is sick for too long, someone, usually an older woman, might quietly suggest it's a changeling. You scoff, maybe. You say you don't believe in that nonsense. But then again, maybe you don't say it out loud. Because in the Victorian home, superstition is insurance. You don't have medical care. You don't have safety nets. You have rituals. Someone falls ill? You pray, yes. But you also open every window, even if it's snowing, because the air must be let out. You put a Bible under their pillow. You light a candle at dusk and let it burn down. You don't speak their name too loudly. You don't make plans for tomorrow. Not until they're better. And if they die? You cover the mirrors. You stop the clocks. You open the door to let the soul out. And you leave the room as it was for a night. Just in case they need to come back and say goodbye. There's comfort in this, as much as fear. When you live a life so uncertain, belief is a structure, a map, a system to make sense of the things that don't make sense. A stillbirth, a fever, a fall down the stairs that didn't look fatal until it was. Sometimes you go to revival meetings, especially when jobs are scarce. Preachers in tents shout about fire and redemption. People faint. People cry. People sing with eyes wide and voices hoarse. You don't know if you believe it, but you feel something. That matters. And sometimes you consult a wise woman, discreetly, quietly, for a charm, a cure, a tea made from herbs that aren't sold in shops. She tells you what the dreams mean. She gives you something to bury under the threshold. You thank her. You never speak of it again. Even in the city, old beliefs cling like chimney soot. Your neighbors might hang garlic by the door. Your aunt swears by copper coins in her shoes. The butcher's wife talks to her dead husband every Thursday at dusk. No one mocks her. Because secretly, you might do the same. In the end, it's all survival. The church gives you eternity. The superstitions help you get through the week. They remind you that your actions matter, even the small ones. That what you do today might ripple into something unseen. That somewhere, somehow, there's meaning behind the madness, even if you can't always find it. The workday ends not with a sigh of relief, but with a dull ache. In your shoulders, in your feet, in your lungs. Your clothes are stiff with sweat and coal dust. Your fingers are grimy even after scrubbing them raw. And your stomach, well, your stomach's been complaining since midday. Dinner is calling, though dinner is a generous word for what's coming. In your Victorian household, there's no overflowing table, no comforting scent of rosemary roast or honey-glazed anything. No, dinner here is a practical exercise in hunger management. You enter the house through the back, careful to stomp the worst of the muck from your boots, but not too hard. The door frame's already loose, and one more good kick might send it sideways. The smell hits you, part familiar, part slightly burnt, and part... Let's not ask what that was. The kitchen is already full. Someone is poking the stove. Someone else is peeling something aggressively. The baby is crying. The dog, if you have one, is circling the table like a vulture who learned table manners. At the center of it all is dinner, bubbling in a dented pot, some kind of stew or a soup or a boiled-to-death compromise of both. Meat, if it's present, is barely recognizable. Maybe a bit of salted pork, gristly and curled like disappointment. Maybe a bone with more promise than substance, boiled for hours to release whatever essence it has left. If you're lucky, there's a scrap of beef, but only if someone found a good deal at the market or managed to charm the butcher. Vegetables are more common, but not the fresh, crunchy kind. These are overcooked turnips, gray-green cabbage, potatoes that have begun the slow decline into something more philosophical than edible. Everything's boiled, everything's soft, everything's vaguely the same color. You each get a bowl. The adults serve the children first, not out of generosity, but out of strategy. If the food runs out, at least the small ones won't be crying all night. You eat quickly, quietly, heads low, elbows close. No one wants to be the one who spills their share. No drinks yet, not until afterward. Water, if you have it, is boiled and cooled in a jug. But even then, it tastes faintly of whatever was in the kettle before. Tea, onions, or despair. If there's a bit of coin to spare, there might be small beer, very low alcohol, barely more than fermented cereal water, but cleaner than the street pump and mildly calming. Sometimes you get bread with your stew. Often it's hard, dry, and cut from the center to hide the mold on the edge. You scrape it clean, you dip it in broth, you eat it anyway. Dessert? Rare. But on holidays, or on payday if it's been a good week, there might be spotted dick, treacle pudding, or a slice of fruit cake so dense it feels like a dare. More often, there's nothing. Or maybe jam on bread, if someone traded favors for a spoonful of sugar and fruit. And now comes the evening stretch, the hours between survival and sleep. The precious sliver of the day where the fire's still warm and the world isn't asking quite so much of you. So what do? You entertain yourself. Because in the Victorian home, distraction is medicine. Laughter is rare, but not extinct. It's hard to find, but when it shows up, it stays a little longer than the pain. Sometimes, someone tells a story, a ghost tale, a family legend, a bit of local gossip stretched into myth. The kids sit wide-eyed, the fire crackling like punctuation. The adults listen with half an ear while darning socks or rubbing aching feet. There might be music, if you're lucky enough to own a fiddle, a harmonica, or even a battered piano missing 2 keys. Or someone might sing, not because they're good, but because the room feels less heavy when it's full of song. Children play games, simple ones. Cat's cradle, knucklebones, hoop and stick, or games of pretend using pebbles and chalk and infinite imagination. If there's a dog, it joins in. If there's a baby, it mostly just gets stepped on. Adults might play cards, nothing fancy. A few rounds of cribbage, maybe a homemade game passed down through generations. Betting is rare. No one has anything to lose. Sometimes, someone reads aloud, from the Bible, a penny novel, or the newspaper, if you can afford one and someone in the house can read well. The stories are serials, crime, romance, horror. The language is flowery. The plot is absurd. And everyone listens like it's Shakespeare. If you live in a village or city, you might go out. To the tavern, maybe. A noisy room thick with smoke and spilled ale. It's loud, it's rowdy, and it smells like sweat and sawdust. But it's warm. And sometimes there's a man with a fiddle and a few sailors who remember sea songs. Or you might stroll through the market, if it's still open, bright with gaslight and alive with shouting vendors. There's food you can't afford, trinkets you don't need, and smells that make your stomach growl again. But it's color, it's motion, it's something besides gray. On holidays, rare, cherished days, there might be a fair, or a dance, or a parade of some sort. The town gathers, music plays, banners wave, and for a few hours, you remember what it feels like to smile without consequence. But most nights, you stay in. You stretch the coals. You tell the same jokes. You warm your hands on a mug of tea so weak it's basically tinted water. You listen to the fire pop and think about how many days until the next payday. You might talk if there's something to say. You might sit in silence if there isn't. You might argue quietly, behind closed doors, about money, about missing bread, about Uncle George and his tendency to disappear on rent day. But eventually, the room dims, the fire shrinks, someone yawns, and then the candles are blown out. It starts with a cough, not a loud one, not theatrical, just a soft, persistent scratch in the throat. Someone at the table wipes their mouth with a sleeve, shrugs, keeps eating. No one says anything, because in a Victorian household, a cough is never just a cough. It's a warning bell. A match lit beside a bale of hay. A tap on the shoulder from something dark and inevitable. You live in close quarters, 10 people, maybe more, in rooms barely large enough for thought. You breathe the same air, share the same basin, use the same towel, sleep shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath. So when one of you gets sick, all of you are already infected. You don't know the word contagion, not really. You just know that illness spreads, fast, unforgiving, and indiscriminate. A cold turns into a fever turns into something worse. And there's no doctor yet, not unless you can pay for one, and you usually can't. So you wait, and hope, and listen for the next cough. Victorian families lived surrounded by disease like modern families live surrounded by wallpaper. It's part of the scenery. Cholera, typhus, scarlet fever, smallpox, diphtheria, tuberculosis, consumption, dropsy, childbed fever. Words you hear often, though half of them you couldn't define. You just know they kill. Tuberculosis, especially. Consumption, they call it. It eats people from the inside. A wasting sickness. First the cough, then the night sweats, then the blood, coughed into a rag, folded quickly, hidden in a pocket. Then the thinness, the hollow cheeks, the 1,000-yard stare. Some say it makes people beautiful before it takes them. A cruel, tragic beauty, like a candle about to gutter out. And it can linger for months, years even. A slow burn. Every Victorian family has a story. A cousin, a sister, a neighbor who just faded, quietly, painfully, a soft disappearance. Child mortality is a fact of life. Babies die. Children die. Infants are born and buried before the week is out. No one talks about it, but everyone carries the weight. You might have a sibling you never met, buried in a small grave in a crowded churchyard. Women whisper about it. The baby took a chill. It was the teething. She turned blue in the night. They never say SIDS or infection or mold spores because they don't know those words yet. They only know that a baby who cried yesterday might be cold by morning. And if the child survives infancy, life is still a minefield of potential killers. A scraped knee might turn septic. A toothache could mean a brain infection. A rash could signal a fever that leaves a child deaf, blind, or worse. Measles, mumps, rubella, they're not childhood inconveniences. They're death sentences. So what do you do when someone falls ill? You start with home remedies. Everyone has their own. Onion poultices for the chest, turpentine on the soles of the feet, bread soaked in milk wrapped around a wound, honey for the throat, cod liver oil for everything. You don't understand why it works. Or if it works, you just do it. You boil herbs, rub salves, burn sulfur in the fireplace. Your grandmother swears by vinegar on a rag tied to the wrist. Your neighbor swears by whiskey and prayer. You try both. Bleeding is still common. Not always by leeches anymore, though you've heard of them. Sometimes just a nick with a knife. A bowl to catch the bad blood. You hope that's enough. And if it gets worse, you send for the doctor. But that's only if there's money. Doctors don't come free. They carry small black bags and large egos, and they speak in Latin, which makes them seem more knowledgeable than they really are. Half the time they guess. The other half, they kill you politely. He might prescribe laudanum, an opium tincture, for pain. It helps, and then it doesn't. It soothes, and then it robs. Or maybe mercury, which makes your gums bleed and your hands shake but supposedly fights infection. Or chloroform, if surgery is required. And by surgery, we mean sawing off a limb and hoping the patient passes out before they scream too loud. Dentistry? Primitive at best. You sit in a wooden chair, hold still, and clench something between your teeth, while a man with questionable hygiene uses iron tools to pry out the problem, and possibly the one next to it. No anesthetic, just a shot of brandy and an arm to bite down on. And sometimes, when there's nothing else to do, you just wait. You watch the fever rise. You wipe the sweat. You spoon broth into cracked lips. You whisper prayers you haven't said in years. You listen to every breath, hoping the next one comes. When someone dies, it's not quiet. There's wailing, loud, long. It's tradition, a noise to let the neighbors know, to fill the house with grief and give it somewhere to go. You wash the body. You close the eyes. You tie the jaw shut, gently, so it doesn't hang open. You dress them in their best clothes, even if that means borrowing some. The windows are opened, even in winter, to let the soul out. The clock is stopped. The mirrors are covered. The house holds its breath. There's no embalming, no refrigeration. The body must be buried quickly. If you're lucky, there's a family plot. If not, there's the pauper's field, rows of nameless graves, stacked deep to make room. The undertaker arrives with his cart. Black coat, black gloves, black horse. It's a quiet transaction. A few coins, a lowered gaze. Sometimes a photographer is called before the burial. A memento mori. A photo of the dead, propped up, eyes painted onto closed lids, made to look alive. It's eerie. It's comforting. It's all you'll have to remember them by. For weeks after, the house feels different. The bed stays empty. The chair is left untouched. The air is still. But there is no time to grieve. Not really. Work goes on. Clothes must be mended. Bread must be baked. Coal must be fetched. Rent must be paid. You carry the loss like a weight in your apron pocket. Always there, always heavy, but never allowed to slow you down. Death is a roommate in the Victorian home, not an occasional guest, not a thief in the night, but a shadow that sits beside the fire, listens to your laughter, and waits patiently for the next cough. In your Victorian household, you don't choose who you are. Your role is assigned by birth, by gender, by your father's mood, by whether or not there was food that week. Let's say you're a woman. That means you're up before anyone else, and you go to sleep last. You are the coal keeper, the water hauler, the cleaner, the cook, the nurse, the peacekeeper, the laundress, and the one who everyone expects to serve, silently, without rest, and without complaint. If you're married, you serve your husband. If you're unmarried, you serve your father. If you're a widow, you serve everyone, and they still talk behind your back. Marriage isn't a love story. It's a survival contract. You marry because you're told to, or because you need protection, or because someone showed up with a steady wage and you can't afford to be picky. If love grows, it's a miracle. If it doesn't, well, at least there's someone to carry the coal. You have no property, no legal rights, no real say. If your husband hits you, no one stops him. If he drinks all the wages, the landlord still expects rent. If you leave him, and that's a very big if, you lose your children, your home, your income, and probably your name. But you stay. Because where would you go? You stay and you run the house. Every inch of it. Every meal, every floorboard, every hand-me-down sock. You stretch pennies into pounds, turn rags into shirts, make stew out of scraps and soap out of ashes. You cook, not for fun, not for Pinterest. You cook because if you don't, they starve. You clean, not for company, because there isn't any, but to fight back the creeping filth that gathers at the edges of poverty. Coal dust in the corners, mold in the pantry, rats behind the stove. You birth children. You lose some. You carry that loss in your ribs and never speak of it. You wash blood from the sheets and lie about how long the labor took. You pretend you're not scared when the fever rises. You boil water, whisper prayers, and stare at the ceiling, wondering how much one body can take before it just stops. And if you're a daughter, you're trained for all of this. Early. You help cook. You help clean. You mind the little ones. You learn to sew, to scrub, to fetch, to wait. You're taught to keep your voice down, your skirt clean, and your smile on. Because one day, you'll be a wife too, and your mother hopes desperately that your match will be better than hers. But she won't say that. She'll just hand you another plate and tell you to keep your chin up. Now, if you're a boy, the expectations are different, but just as unforgiving. You're taught to work immediately. You carry coal, you fetch water, you hold tools, you go with your father to the docks, the field, the shop, the mine. You learn to be useful or be forgotten. You don't complain, you don't cry, you don't stop. Because to be a man is to be strong, not emotionally, not morally, but physically. You lift, you sweat, you earn. School might be part of your life. Might. By mid-century, schools are slowly becoming more common, especially in the city. But many families can't afford the luxury of literacy. You might go to class in the morning and work in the afternoon, or vice versa, or not at all. Education is seen as a risk. If you're at school, you're not bringing in money. And if you're not bringing in money, then you're a burden. And burdens get punished. But let's not forget the children. The small ones, the silent ones, the ones with wide eyes and calloused feet. Your childhood is short. You don't have a nursery. You don't have toys. You don't even have time. You work. As soon as you can walk without falling, you're given a job. At home, in the streets, in the fields. You might pluck feathers for hats. You might sweep chimneys. You might sit at a loom for 12 hours straight with only water and a crust of bread to keep you company. You don't complain, not because you're brave, but because it wouldn't matter. Children are everywhere in Victorian England, but they're barely seen. You're not protected by laws, not really. You can be beaten, abandoned, overworked, underfed, and the state won't intervene. If you're injured on the job, they replace you. If you're killed, they step around you. You play when you can, in alleys, in puddles, with sticks and stones and whatever scraps imagination allows. But even then, there's a sense of urgency. Play is not rest. It's training. You're learning to be tough. You're learning to be tired. You're learning how to take up as little space as possible. If your family has a lot of children, it's both a blessing and a curse. More hands, more mouths. The older ones help raise the younger ones. The youngest sometimes don't get names until they survive the first few winters. And yet, despite all of this, there is love. Real love. Fierce, desperate, exhausted love. Mothers tuck in sons who are too old to be tucked. Fathers roughhouse with the baby when no one's looking. Siblings share shoes, secrets, and stolen apples. Children fall asleep curled up together for warmth. Laughter echoes between poverty's cracks. You share everything. Food, grief, joy, socks. There are fights. Of course there are. Loud ones, silent ones, ones that simmer for weeks. But when illness comes, or when rent is due, or when the landlord knocks twice, the family pulls together like knotted rope. Because that's what a Victorian family is. A bundle of bodies bound by duty and blood and desperation, doing everything they can to stay afloat. A tired, tangled miracle. The afternoon hours in a Victorian family aren't just about finishing work. They're about navigating the cracks in the system, the little ways life presses down harder when no one's looking. By now, your stomach is growling again. Your clothes are stiff with sweat, and you've counted the coins in your pocket 3 times, each time hoping they'll add up to something more. But the truth is, it's not just hard work that makes this life so difficult. It's everything around it. The rules, the punishments, the people who wear better shoes than you and never seem to walk anywhere. Let's say you're still working. You're in a mill, a shop, a street corner, maybe a home that's not your own. Because if you're a domestic servant, you're not even allowed to be tired. And you'd better not make mistakes. The punishments come fast. A missed stitch, docked wages, a dropped tray, no dinner. Talking back, dismissal. Late for work, a fine. Too slow, fired. No warnings, no appeal. Victorian employment law is a joke, and you're the punchline. Bosses don't care if you're ill. They don't care if your baby cried all night, or if your mother collapsed in the kitchen. You show up, do your work, and disappear when you're told to. And if you can't, there's someone waiting to take your place, someone younger, hungrier, and more desperate. Now imagine you're a child worker, and your job is to crawl under machines or lift things twice your size. You slip, you fall, the floor is slick, your arm gets caught. You scream. You know what happens? You get yelled at for bleeding on the product. And if the injury is bad enough to stop you from working, you go home, and that's it. No compensation, no hospital, no care. You're just one less wage earner and another mouth to feed. You think about the workhouse and your stomach drops. The workhouse is always the shadow. It's there, around the corner of every missed payday. Every time your father drinks the rent. Every time the boots finally fall apart. Every time someone says, "I'm sorry, there's no work today." The workhouse means separation, harder labor, uniforms, rules, endless rules. Families split into male and female wings. Children raised by strangers. Gruel for breakfast. Stones to crush. And prayers said under breath so cold it comes out like fog. To be poor is hard. To be visibly poor, poor enough for the parish to notice, is shameful. But to enter the workhouse? That's the Victorian equivalent of a social funeral. And yet, many do, because the streets are worse. Crime in your neighborhood isn't just background noise. It's a survival strategy. Theft isn't always malicious. It's sometimes as simple as taking a roll from a market stall when your sister hasn't eaten in 2 days. A loaf of bread, a candle, a pair of gloves from a cart left unattended. But theft, no matter the reason, comes with a price. You don't get a warning. You don't get a talking to. You get arrested, dragged by the collar, sometimes by a constable, sometimes by a shopkeeper who's had enough of street urchins. You're marched through the neighborhood while people stare, and your mother sees you and looks away because she can't afford to know you at that moment. If you're lucky, you get a fine. If you're not, it's jail. Prison, a cold, foul-smelling place where children sleep on straw and grown men stare through the bars like ghosts. And the justice system? It doesn't care who you are, only who you aren't. If you're poor, you're suspicious. If you're poor and loud, you're dangerous. If you're poor and a woman, you're probably immoral. And if you're poor and a child, you're already on the path to ruin. Victorian laws are designed to protect property, not people, especially not people like you. You see the rich, not often, but enough. They glide past in carriages, behind glass, in velvet gloves and impossible hats. They never look at you directly. If they give you money, it's a coin they won't miss. If they give you charity, it's with eyes that say, "Be grateful I even noticed you." They live in warm houses. They have full bathtubs and real sugar. They don't boil bones to make broth. They don't lie awake wondering if the landlord will throw them out. But here's the kicker. You're not angry, not all the time. You've been taught that this is just the way things are, that God made the classes, that rich people deserve their wealth because they work harder, even though you've never seen one with blisters. You hear talk of reformers, of people who think the poor should be educated, given medicine, lifted up. But that talk stays on paper, in pamphlets. It doesn't patch your roof. It doesn't stop your sister from coughing. So you keep going. You do the math in your head. 2 more hours of work, then the walk home, then dinner, hopefully. Then maybe you'll find a coin on the street. Maybe not. Maybe you'll get paid tomorrow. Maybe not. Maybe the landlord won't come tonight. Maybe your brother will come home sober. Hope in a Victorian family is not poetic. It's mathematical. It's rationed, tucked into small corners, folded into pockets, whispered when the children are asleep. Because here's the truth. You are always at risk of falling, and no one is waiting to catch you. Night in a Victorian household doesn't arrive like a gentle closing curtain. It falls like a trap. It slams down over your street, your home, your skin, and brings with it a tension that wraps itself around the spine and won't let go. You can feel it the moment the last light dies. The street's empty. The laughter fades. The fires crackle low. Night is when the rules change. You hear it before you see it. A shout in the distance. The clatter of feet against cobblestone. The unmistakable crash of something wooden. A crate. A cart. A door. Then, silence. Because the city at night doesn't sleep. It waits. In your home, the fire is banked. Not out. Never out. But covered to last the night. You don't waste coal. You keep it burning just enough to catch in the morning. The room dims. Shadows climb the walls. You light a candle, but only briefly. Tallow, wax, oil, they all cost money. You ration the flame. A stub of light for a few precious moments. To finish mending. To check the baby's breathing. To stir one last pot. Then you pinch it out, and the dark settles in. You think your home is secure, but security is a modern luxury. There's no real lock on the door, just a bolt and your hope. The windows rattle when the wind rises. If you're on the ground floor, you've nailed the shutters shut. If you're upstairs, you keep a brick by the bed, just in case. Because night is when danger comes. Burglars, drunks, desperate men who think they have nothing left to lose. Sometimes they take things. Sometimes they take people. The constables, if they patrol your neighborhood at all, won't arrive quickly, or gently, or helpfully. Sometimes they just watch. Sometimes they suspect you of the very crime you're reporting, so you don't report. You just learn to keep quiet, to hold your breath when footsteps stop outside your window, to pray they move on. You hear screams in the distance, not every night, but often enough. You tell yourself it's a cat or a couple fighting. You lie to yourself because the truth is worse. Night is also when illness comes to collect. Fever always spikes at night. That's when the sweating starts, the rattling breath, the low moans from the next room or the same bed. You sit up in the dark and listen. Count the seconds between gasps. You press a damp cloth to a burning forehead, whispering promises you can't keep. You don't know if you'll still be a family in the morning. And if someone does die, you can't scream. Not now. Not while the baby's asleep. Not while the others still need their rest for work tomorrow. So you sit beside the body and wait for dawn. But even if no one is sick, even if no one knocks on your door or tries the handle or breaks a window, sleep doesn't come easy. Because the beds aren't beds. They're arrangements, compromises, shelves for the barely living. You lie down, fully clothed, not from laziness, because it's cold, and because there's no room for modesty or comfort, or the luxury of changing garments that will only be worn again tomorrow. You lie next to siblings, parents, cousins, or strangers if your family takes in boarders. You breathe the same air. You feel every twitch, every cough, every shift of weight. There are no mattresses, just sacks stuffed with straw, or horsehair, or rags. Always lumpy, always damp, always full of something that bites. The sheets, if you have them, haven't been washed in weeks, because there's no time, no soap, no sun to dry them in this season. You hear the mice in the walls. You hope it's mice. Could be worse. Could be rats. Could be something that shouldn't be alive. You close your eyes and pray you don't wake up choking, because the fire could fail. The chimney could backdraft. The gaslight, in richer homes, could leak. The wind could knock loose a brick from the roof. The neighbor's wall could collapse. Everything is old. Everything's failing. Everything creaks. And every Victorian night carries the possibility that this also the last one. So you sleep in shifts, informally. One person stirs, another quiets. A child whimpers, a baby coughs, someone snores, someone always snores, and the dark presses in, reminding you that safety is a story rich people tell themselves. You know the truth, that at any moment, someone could die. A fall on the stairs, a blocked flue, a slipped knife in the dark, a drunk stumbling home and mistaking your house for his, a rat bite that turns septic. Sleep is not guaranteed. Not in this house, not in this time, not in this body. So you lie still, wrapped in thin wool, listening to the fire pop and hiss like it's speaking a language you're too tired to understand. You stare at the ceiling and try to think of something warm, a holiday, a sweet, a dream that doesn't end in fire or sirens or funerals. You try to remember what it feels like to fall asleep without fear. But that was another life, another century, another you now. You survive. And if you're very lucky, you dream. The fire is nearly out now. Just a faint red glow in the hearth, soft and pulsing, like the last heartbeat of the day. Everyone is lying down. No one is speaking. Not anymore. The house is still, not because it's quiet, but because it's exhausted. You've made it to the end of another Victorian day, and it's been heavy, hasn't it? Not dramatic, not loud, just relentless. A quiet weight pressing down hour after hour. Not one big tragedy, just dozens of small ones, stacked like bricks, forming the shape of a life. You did the work. You woke early. You walked in the cold. You dressed in layers of scratchy, half-mended clothing. You fed your family with scraps. You bent your back, bit your tongue, earned your pennies, spent them on survival. You kept your head down in church. You kept your voice soft in the house. You kept your worries to yourself. And when the cough came, or the rat appeared, or the floorboard cracked, you just kept going. Because that's what a Victorian family did. They kept going. Even when the meal was thin, even when the water was cold, even when the landlord raised the rent, or the firewood ran out, or the child didn't wake up, they endured. They grieved quickly because grief was a luxury. They smiled rarely because joy was suspicious. They hoped in whispers because hope, too loudly spoken, could be punished. But underneath the smoke, the soot, the splinters, and the sorrow, there was resilience, a fierce, stubborn pulse, an instinct that said, just one more day, one more fire, one more meal, one more breath. Now, as you lie there, in that cold, crumbling bed, your muscles sore, your hands chapped, your stomach still a little hungry, something happens. A sound. Quiet. Familiar. It's not a scream or a siren or a knock at the door. It's your own breath. Steady, soft, rising and falling beneath a blanket that never quite covers your feet. And with it comes a kind of warmth, not from the hearth, not from the wool, from something deeper, a thought, a memory, a distant awareness that this is not your world anymore, that this life, this cold, coal-stained, soot-heavy life, is not the one you'll wake up to, because you are lying in your own bed, your real bed, the one in the here and now. Maybe the pillow is soft beneath your head. Maybe there's a quiet hum of electricity nearby, a fridge, a fan, a passing car. Maybe you're under a blanket that smells of laundry detergent, not damp wool and shared sweat. And if you listen closely, you might even hear your own heating system kicking in. A modern miracle. A quiet, mechanical guardian that tells you, without saying a word, that you are warm and you are safe. The world around you is still full of struggle. No doubt. But it is not that world. You're not waiting for the fire to catch. You're not sleeping beside rats. You're not listening for footsteps that might mean danger. You're not worried about waking up to an eviction or a dead sibling or the need to boil water before you can drink it. You have light at the flick of a switch, water at the turn of a tap, warmth at the push of a button, privacy, comfort, cleanliness. You're free. Free from a life where survival was the only goal. Free from a place where illness had no medicine and childhood had no protection. Free from a society that valued wealth more than worth. So tonight, as your body drifts, as your thoughts soften, as your breath deepens, let gratitude settle in. Quietly, like fog on a window pane. Be grateful for the little things, your pillow, your thermostat, the silence that isn't fearful, just peaceful, the fact that no one is coughing in the next room. Be grateful that the worst of this story is only a story, that you got to visit it, not live it, that you got to feel it, without having to fear it. And most of all, be grateful that when you open your eyes in the morning, you won't be in that room. You won't be under that threadbare blanket. You won't be chewing cold bread and worrying about soot in your lungs. You'll wake in your time, in your place in your life, and what a gift that is. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in Victorian England. Sleep well.